Welcome to the June 2011 Tap Time TLC training. I'm Janice Gibson, your host for these monthly EMT tapping training sessions. I create these training videos for foster and adoptive parents to help them help their children heal from the emotional impact of the life circumstances their children have endured. The healing modality that we use to aid in this process is called energy meridian tapping, EMT for short, and sometimes we just say tapping. If you are not a foster or adoptive parent, please know that, number one, you're most welcome, and number two, that you may use these techniques presented in these training videos too. Everyone is welcome here, and we are so glad you stopped by to check things out. I'm really excited about how this month's lesson came to fruition. The topic of discussion this month is perspective, tapping into its healing potential using art and EMT. And we will also be examining the statement, quote, "Things are not always as they appear to be," end quote. More aptly put, you, the parents, will be helping your children examine that concept through the use of artwork created by a world-renowned artist known for her camouflage paintings. More on that exciting news in a moment. The purpose or intent of this month's training is to use artwork as a tool to help your child identify self-perceptions they may have formulated about themselves that are untrue and emotionally damage to their self-esteem, self-worth, and often their psyche. Then, once their perceptions are uncovered, you can start to encourage your children to use EMT to diffuse the negative emotions associated with those false beliefs about themselves. Let's begin by defining perspective. The following definitions are from wordcentral.com's website. Please note that the text in the orange-colored font has been changed by myself to lend significance to this particular lesson. So the first thing we want to tell the kids is perspective, in the way we're going to be using it, happens to be a noun. And there are 4 different definitions of perspective, all of which apply depending on how we're looking at things with the lesson we're going to be going through. So the first definition is the art or technique of painting or drawing a scene so that objects in it seem to have depth and distance. We'll be using this feature when we look at the artist's work that's coming up. 2A is defined as the relationship in which a subject or its parts are viewed mentally. The example given is places the issues in perspective. Definition 2B represents point of view. We're going to be talking a lot about a child's point of view today. Your goal in this exercise is to uncover what your child's perspective is about themselves so that you may then direct your child, if need be, in a more positive direction toward global understanding of their life events and to a place where self-esteem, self-worth, and self-love may flourish. The third definition of perspective is the power to understand things in their true relationship to each other. The cited example is, try to keep your perspective so you don't turn against yourself. And lastly, number 4, the appearance to the eye of objects in space with respect to their distance and positions in relation to each other. This concept will be demonstrated and discussed shortly also. Eventually, you will use your child's understanding of these concepts to help them unravel their feelings. Your goal is to get your child to reveal to you what they think about themselves and to reveal the self-beliefs they have formed because of their experiences and circumstances. So the first step is to make your kids aware of the understanding of the definition of perspective. The second step is to select the common saying, proverb, or adage you'll be using to help your kids with a particular concept. We will be working with the concept perspective today. For the sake of clarity, you may also want to explain to your kids what an adage is. It's defined as an often stated observation regarding something of common experience. For example, quote, Shelley always sees the world through rose-colored glasses, end quote. Here are a couple more examples of sayings that you may want to use with this process. This quote from Benjamin Franklin should serve useful in certain circumstances. Quote, believe none of what you hear and half of what you see, end quote. This quote by David R. Hawkins is a really good one to explore. Quote, simple kindness to oneself and all that lives is the most powerful transformational force of all, end quote. And lastly, this quote from an unknown contributor, quote, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain, end quote. These sayings, and many others like them, can lead to a revealing conversation with your kids. The third step is to use artwork to visually stimulate and engage your child in conversation about how they feel about themselves, their circumstances, and or their world. There's no limit to the types of visual aids that you might use to get the ball rolling. Collages, watercolors, graffiti, photos, poetry, and even CD album covers. And those are just a few examples. In a moment, I will introduce you to what we're going to be using today. Every adoptive and foster parent on the planet has seen firsthand the negative impact their children have incurred because of the life circumstances and mistreatment sustained by those whose job it was to love and protect them. You also know how often your children have determined for themselves that they were the ones who were somehow and in some way at fault, or not good enough, or responsible, not lovable, etc. It's heartbreaking and it's gut-wrenching. Your goal with this exercise is to help your child shift their negative beliefs about themselves toward a more accurate, global perspective and lead them to an empowering personal viewpoint of acceptance and self-love. So let's recap your blueprint thus far. In step 1, you helped your children understand the definition of perspective. In step 2, you introduced them to the adage, saying, or proverb your exercise will revolve around. And in the third step, you will have pre-selected a visual image to examine with your children because you believe it will encourage your kids in a dialogue about how they are feeling, thinking, or believing about themselves. Now it's time to reveal the painting I have chosen to demonstrate the adage that things are not always as they appear to be. And to accomplish this feat, I'm excited to announce that I've been granted permission through the courtesy of my favorite artist, Bev Doolittle, and her publicist, the Greenwich Workshop, Inc., to be able to use 5 images from one of Mrs. Doolittle's paintings in this month's video. And I'm thrilled, honored, and delighted by their generosity. The name of the paintings we're being granted permission to use are from a piece entitled Hide and Seek Composite. And this is an image of that masterful art piece. Bev Doolittle's camouflage art is revered worldwide, and she's one of America's most collected artists. She has earned the honor of being described as a camouflage artist because of her distinctive use of context, design, and pattern. She uses these techniques to guide viewers to discover meanings within her paintings, which at first appear to be hidden. It is not until one's perspective shifts that the additional hidden meanings become observable. Brilliant, fascinating, and really fun. Mrs. Doolittle says, quote, "I use camouflage to slow down the storytelling in my painting." End quote. We're going to be using her hide-and-seek painting to encourage your son or daughter to tell a story about what they are camouflaging when it comes to their thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about themselves and their circumstances. At first glance, it's easy to read the written message in this painting, hide and seek. But from this distance and perspective, it's not so easy to detect the camouflage properties that are also artfully interwoven into this painting. It's here that you will want to explain to your children that camouflage is defined as hiding or disguising something by covering it up or changing the way it looks. Also, now would be a good time to explain to your children that when people experience hurt, pain, and or trauma, they will often try to camouflage their emotions so they don't have to feel them. Sometimes people will pretend they aren't hurting by pushing their unwanted feelings away. At other times, some people begin to see only the good things around them by what's sometimes expressed as putting on rose-colored glasses, which means they're just pretending that everything is wonderful. You can further explain that people do this for their own protection, and that it's not really a bad thing. The important message you want to convey to your kids and help them to understand is, even though the hurt and pain have been camouflaged, it's still there, hanging around, and it can't remain hidden forever. At some point in time, those painful feelings will reveal themselves again. So let's look a little deeper to see what surprises lie hidden in Bev Doolittle's hide-and-seek painting. Here we have a much larger image to examine. Notice how this causes the text in the image to appear slightly less noticeable. Now take a moment to study the image. What else do you see? Are there other images revealing themselves to you? Are you able to clearly identify any objects from this perspective? In this painting, there are actually 24 separate individual paintings that have been pieced together to create this artwork. Some of the images are painted in the foreground, meaning that they appear to be closer to you than items in other panels appear to be. Some of the images are way in the background, almost completely absorbed into the landscape, and therefore not as easily detected. And other images in these panels are somewhere in between. we're going to examine 4 panels within this painting. And these little red floating boxes indicate where those 4 panels are located within the composite painting. This is a close-up of panel 1-5. It only takes a moment or two for your eyes to spot the image that was previously hidden by the artful camouflage of Bev Doolittle. Out of the rock formations and the winter snowfall, a brown and white pinto's head, neck, mane, and part of its upper body magically appear in the foreground. Have your child trace the horse's image with their finger to show you where it's located. Ask them to point out the parts of the pinto that are hard to separate from the snow and the rocks. In panel 1-12, we're able to see the entire illustration of the pinto because the perspective in this photo encompasses a broader area of view. We're seeing this scene from farther away than in the first photo. It's also quite easy to see the horse within this panel because its features are more clearly defined and prominent. Ask your child to show you the outline of the horse's tail because it's a little bit harder to see. Encourage them to look at the rock formations and ask the kids if the rocks remind them of anything. Play with this and make it fun. In panel 1-22A, we have yet another perspective with this image. This time, the view reveals more of the surrounding background. It's difficult in some places to differentiate where the mounds of the snow end and the wintry skyline begins. The 2 images of the pinto horses are easily visible, yet they are a little bit harder to see than the horse in the previous picture. With this image, you could ask your child to explain why they think it's harder to see the horses in this painting. Their answers just may give you insight to how they are feeling about themselves. So be sure to listen up and take notice. The revealed info they divulge will be powerful to use in their future EMT tapping sessions. And in our last image, panel 1-10, once again, a closer perspective is shown to us. But this time, the definition or camouflage of the pinto is such that it makes it more difficult for our eyes to see the outline of the horse's body. Its hind legs and tail are barely distinguishable from the rock formations that the horse is standing in front of. Most of the horse's neck, body, and front legs appear to be part of the snow that's landed between the rocks. When you first gaze at this image, it's almost as if you can feel the horse's presence in the painting before you actually see it standing there. The sensation of feeling the presence of something before we understand what that something is happens with our emotions too. There are times when we are in a mood, but when asked why, we can't really explain it. We can't recall anything in particular that would have brought on such a mood or why it's hanging on. It's just here. All we know is we're feeling moody and we can't explain to you why we are. Parents, this would be a perfect opportunity to ask your kids if they have ever been upset, cranky, or moody without understanding the why of it all. Ask them if they remember a time when this might have happened to them. Ask them how long it lasted, and what, if anything, they did to cope with it. You get the picture. Here we have the 5 images of Bev Doolittle's hide-and-seek paintings that were used to teach and show your kids examples of perspective. In the hands of an artist, these different perspectives, woven with the art of camouflage, create masterpieces beyond compare. Such is the case with the magic and wonder of Bev Doolittle's camouflage paintings. But now it's time to connect the definitions of perspectives that artists use in their work to our emotions, beliefs, because in some respects, sometimes our emotions are up front, staring us in the face and grabbing our attention, so we can't help but be aware of them. And other times, they are buried very deeply because they are too darn painful to deal with right now. When we bury pain and hurt that deeply, most of the time, we don't even realize those feelings are on the scene. But they are. They are running silently in the background, much like our computer's operating system does. Camouflage in a painting creates magic, illusion, fun, and beauty at the hand of a gifted artist. When people apply camouflage, distance, limited perspective, and blending into the background techniques to their emotional landscape, they produce the complete opposite effect of what's revealed in beautiful artwork. When this happens, people are unable to see their beauty, depth, gifts, talents, uniqueness, and more. All they are able to see from that perspective is everything they don't like about themselves, or have come to believe because somewhere along the line they received a message that they weren't good enough, worthy, lovable, smart, or fill in the blank, etc. From the unfavorable point of view, it has the potential to inflict enormous pain and heartache. And when viewed in a positive light, with all the facts examined and combined with energy meridian tapping, a favorable outcome is pretty much guaranteed, but only if you use it. And I'm talking about the EMT. Limited perspectives through the eyes of a child can produce a completely different way of looking at the world and oneself. This is especially true of children who have sustained and endured life events that have caused them to be placed in the adoptive and foster care communities. Add to the mix how these kids feel about the potentially violent and/or emotional circumstances with which they were separated from their family of origin, and you add another layer of emotional difficulty. Then when you add on their feelings and confusion about having to leave behind their home, friends and family, their school, their toys, all their clothing, and their pets, these kids and their caregivers now have an emotional beehive with which to contend. Given all of that, it's no surprise that your kids have emotional outbursts and difficult behaviors bubbling up, over, and out of control. Using the 5 photos from the hide-and-seek painting, you can encourage your child to talk to you about any self-perceptions they may be harboring. Once you know what's going on in their hearts and head, then you can help them to view things from a different perspective, one that eliminates the child's belief that they were somehow responsible for the way they were treated and the subsequent circumstances they're now dealing with. You as a foster and adoptive parent know firsthand how kids tend to make things their fault. You also have plenty of experience with the psychological and behavioral impact that's created when kids live through difficult experiences. Parents get why their kids' emotions are running amok, yet understanding the why of it all and dealing with the outcome are two different ball games. That's when it's time to invite EMT to lend you a helping hand. Tapping isn't just for the kids, you know. Tapping professionals from around the globe recommend that parents begin the healing process by tapping on their own thoughts, feelings, and emotions before they begin working with their children. Working on yourself first garners amazing results for the entire family and belongs at the top of your must-do list. I know EMT works because I've witnessed the healing impact of it firsthand in myself and in my clients. Millions of people know that EMT, aka tapping, alleviates the pain and suffering of emotional and physical abuse, neglect, abandonment, and more. And they know it because they use it, and they've experienced the results. Parents, are you ready to teach your kids how to use energy meridian tapping to turn their negative thoughts, beliefs, and perceptions around? Now's the time for step 4, breaking out the EMT. Once you have concluded your discussion with your kids about the concept you're working on, and you've ascertained your child's thoughts and beliefs that are in need of revision, it's time for tapping. Shown on your screen is a diagram of the primary tapping points used during a tapping session. I'm not going to conduct a tapping session in this video. There are plenty of detailed instructions on how to conduct a tapping session on my website at www.emtforfosterfamilies.com. Those of you who have been participating in these monthly training classes are already proficient at using EMT. If you are new to tapping, you will find a ton of helpful information on my website with easy-to-follow how-to instructions. I have created a PDF file of this month's technique that fully explains each of the steps in this process. The PDF can be downloaded from my website. If you want your child's out-of-control outbursts to become a thing of the past, first, teach them EMT, and then help them to remember to use it. By the way, that goes for parents too. Step 5 in your process is gather information, then rinse and repeat as needed. I often tell my clients that the hardest part about doing EMT is remembering to use it. I tell parents to make using EMT a game. When you make it fun, the kids will do it. And I tell the kids it's their job to remind themselves and other family members, parents too, to use their tapping tools. Using the KISS principle, which is keep it simple, sweetie, makes it easy to remember to use EMT. And here's how you accomplish that. Tell your family members, if you're feeling anything that you don't like, it's time to tap. And remember, EMT can't help you if you're not tapping. Once you and your family master remembering to use EMT, and you begin to incorporate the other techniques I teach during these monthly trainings, you will take your physical and emotional well-being to new heights of love, joy, and happiness. How cool is that? Words cannot adequately express my gratitude to Bev Doolittle and the Greenwich Workshop, Inc. for granting me permission to use the hide-and-seek images in this month's training video. I thank you both from the bottom of my heart. Well, everybody, this is a wrap for this month's training, and I thank you ever so much for watching. I'm Janice Gibson, the EMT Empress, and your host for these monthly EMT Tap Time TLC training videos. These sessions are all about a whole lot of TLC, tapping, laughing, and caring, that is. I hope you'll join me next month for another exciting adventure of learning how to use EMT to heal what ails you. Until then, remember to tap your way to a great day.